Well, good morning, everybody. This is Frank McGalley. I am your State Director for Homeless Education, and we are now going to begin the McKinney-Vento Reauthorization 101 webinar this morning. Moving right into our material, I do have to start with a disclaimer, and this is the same disclaimer that went out in the email to everybody over the last couple of weeks as we've begun discussing this topic. As of today's date, our state educational agency has received very limited information from the U.S. Department of Education. Therefore, this session will primarily focus on the statutory language amendments that are just basic facts out of the law. The information provided in this session is the best information available at this time, but I actually know for a fact that some information is likely to change in the coming days and weeks. Please make sure that you keep that in mind. I also want to mention that I have set aside 2 times for questions throughout this presentation. I'm probably going to ask, due to the number of folks that we do have in this webinar this morning, that we will be typing our questions. And I will do my best to answer the questions this morning, but I do want everybody to know that I don't have answers to everybody's questions at this time. Again, like this disclaimer says, we're working with very, very limited information at this point. So I'll do my best to answer questions for you this morning. However, I will be writing down all questions, and I will get those answered as I can over the coming weeks and months in the implementation of this program. So a quick overview of reauthorization. As I hope everybody is aware, we've been discussing it for months at this point. The Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, was signed into law on December 10th, 2015 by President Obama. ESSA reauthorizes the Elementary and Secondary Education Act and the Education subtitle of the McKinney-Vento Act, and includes substantive changes for the Education for Homeless Children and Youth program. The information provided in this presentation is the best information currently available, but as I mentioned, it may change in the coming days and months. ADE and the Homeless Education Office, myself, will be providing increased technical assistance on McKinney-Vento implementation as implementation time approaches July 1st of this year. I will give a little side note here that I want to make it very, very clear to everybody on this webinar and who may be watching a recording in the future that the implementation date for the McKinney-Vento Act portion of ESSA is July 1st, 2016. So please do keep that in mind. While all of the other programs implement July 1st, 2017, we do have an implementation date that is 3 months from tomorrow for all intents and purposes. So please do keep that in mind. I do want to let everybody know to visit our webpage for more information, and there is a link. I just yesterday in the last couple of days, have been working on revamping the webpage. And I have added a new page for reauthorization that looks a little something like this. So when you go to the main page, the Homeless Education page, it will look like this. And then I've added a link that says Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015, McKinney-Vento Reauthorization. When you click that link, you'll come to this page, which includes the full text of the statute, the Federal Register document that came out 2 weeks ago. That's basically a regurgitation of the law, but then it does include some specific information from my office around state planning. There is a summary document with comments from Brustein Manasevit. There's a summary of major amendments that's courtesy of NACE. There's a timeline for implementation, also courtesy of NACE, and a copy of this PowerPoint is available at that webpage for you at this time. So the overall objective for this training this morning is to provide a summary of the amendments to the McKinney-Vento Homeless Education Assistance Improvements Act and the Every Student Succeeds Act. So moving right into our material, I'm going to start with specifics to the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. And there's new requirements for capacity and training for both state coordinators and liaisons. It includes an increased, the amendments, I should say, include an increased emphasis on ensuring adequate capacity and training for state coordinators and local liaisons to be able to carry out the duties sufficiently. So we're going to be talking a lot more about liaisons being provided the capacity to attend training, to carry out their statutory duties, and some of those pieces that we have, quite frankly, had difficulty with. Many times liaisons are wearing multiple hats within their LEA. I expect and anticipate that those many hats will continue, but LEAs are going to have to look at ensuring that position has the capacity to carry out the duties in the law. It will require states to adopt policies and practices to ensure local liaisons participate in professional development and technical assistance activities. And as part of an increased overall emphasis on identification, it requires training for local liaisons and other LEA personnel on the identification and specific needs of McKinney-Vento eligible students and definitions of legislative terminology. So talking a little bit more about capacities and training, it specifies a broader list of role groups that are to be trained. So my role, obviously, I have to train liaisons and the LEA personnel and other state-level partners in homelessness, but then there's going to be requirements for LEA liaisons to train a broader list of groups within your schools. Now, we have done this in practice over the last several years through the monitoring process, but the law specifically stipulates a broader list of groups to be trained. And this is going to include your school administrators, principals, and other school leaders, teachers, enrollment personnel, special education and specialized instructional support personnel, attendance officers, early education program personnel, housing, runaway homeless youth agencies and child care providers, child welfare, social service, law enforcement, mental health, and other domestic violence agencies. So again, we've been doing this in practice, but the law does now very specifically point to these groups, ensuring that you train these folks. So we're going to have to revamp our monitoring process to determine how that is being done at the LEA level. I toyed with whether I was going to include this information about new state coordinator responsibilities, but I do think it's important to share this with everybody. It requires the annual posting of the numbers of homeless children and youth identified in the state on the SCA website. Well, good news, we already do that. It requires state coordinators to ensure that homeless parents, children, and youth are informed of the duties of the local liaison and post an annually updated list of local liaisons to the SCA website. We do this partially already. We do have an updated local liaison list on our website. I try to actually update this once a month, if not more often. So we're doing that part of it. But I do think we are going to have to do a better job of informing parents, children, and youth of the duties of local liaisons. It also requires state coordinators to respond to parent, guardian, youth inquiries to ensure that homeless children and youth receive the protections and services to which they are entitled. So we do this as well, but we're going to have an increased emphasis on this and ensuring that emails and phone calls are answered timely. And we're working on some of those things in the office already. So just so everyone is aware. So removal of barriers. There's an increased emphasis on identifying and removing barriers, specifically to receiving credit for partial or for full coursework completed satisfactorily at previous schools. So one of the things that homeless students struggle with due to their transiency particularly in high school, if they move mid-semester, they are not obtaining credit for completing coursework satisfactorily at the previous school. So we do have to address this. I think this is going to have to be addressed at the state level, and we're just going to have to do our best on this and start implementing policies to ensure that students can receive partial credit if needed. Increased emphasis on identifying and removing barriers for homeless students meeting eligibility criteria to participation in academic and extracurricular activities, including magnet and charter schools, summer school, career and technical education, advanced placement courses, and online learning. We have done much of this in practice already, so I'm not too worried about this, but again, this emphasis is now specifically laid out in the law. Some more barrier things, some more barrier items, not things, I apologize. Some more barrier items to keep in mind. It's going to require the removal of barriers to school enrollment and participation due to absences or outstanding fees and fines. An example of this, I actually received an email on this topic yesterday. We had a student who recently moved here to Arizona from California, and they had $300 in fees due to the prior school, and the prior school would not release their school record until that fee was paid. So obviously that's a clear barrier to the enrollment and retention of a child or youth, and the law now spells this out for us specifically, whereas before we just went back to that general barrier language. It also requires the immediate enrollment of homeless children and youth, even if they missed application or enrollment deadlines during any period of homelessness. And it broadens the reference to barriers related to immunizations and immunization records to include screenings and other health records. So again, many of these items we have been doing in practice, but now we are the statute is going to specifically dictate that we do some of these items now. So on identification and eligibility, the amended language includes an increased emphasis on the identification of McKinney-Vento eligible students. There are multiple additions of the word identification throughout the statute, and a requirement for state coordinators to provide training to local liaisons, school personnel, and community agencies on identification. Now, here's a key thing, a key provision in the new statute that is huge. I will say it's huge. It removes, the amended language removes awaiting foster care placement from the definition of homelessness effective December 10th, 2016. Please keep that in mind. Students who will be identified from the beginning of the school year until December 10th of 16 will qualify for the remainder of the year, but on December 11th, there will be no more identification of children awaiting foster care placement under McKinney-Vento. And I will talk about this a little bit more in the next section of this PowerPoint, so please bear with me on that. This also authorized local liaisons, after receiving training, to determine eligibility for HUD programs for homeless children and youth and their immediate families without further action from HUD. This is a piece that we will be receiving more guidance on over the summer, and so please just bear with me on that one. I will not have any questions for you on that today, similar to other portions of this information. School stability. These are some really important things. The law will presume that it is in a homeless child's best interest to continue attending the school of origin unless this is against the wishes of the parent, guardian, or youth. So the law is now very specifically dictating that a child's best interest is to continue attending their school of origin. It specifies in the statute that school selection, best interest determination, should be made on student-centered factors, including the impact of mobility on the student, and prioritizes the wishes of the parent, guardian, or youth. Previously, up until this point, this has been in practice, but by way of guidance. And again, this was added to the law now. It also broadens the definition of school of origin to include public preschool programs and the feeder schools. So feeder schools, this we also did in practice as a result of a federal court ruling back in 2006, I believe it was. So our favorite topic of transportation. The amended language removes the word homeless in reference to school of origin transportation, resulting in transportation for the remainder of the academic year for formerly homeless students who have become permanently housed. What I will tell you on this piece is, again, we've been doing this in practice in our state simply because it was determined before my time as state coordinator and state director that if you don't provide transportation for the remainder of the year, that you are creating a barrier for that student to remain enrolled in his school of origin. But again, we've been doing this in practice, but now it's going to be dictated in statute. It is now dictated in statutory language. Speaking of preschool, it includes an increased emphasis on access to preschool education for young homeless children. It requires local liaisons to ensure access to public preschool programs, including Head Start and Early Head Start, and early intervention services under IDEA Part C for young children with disabilities. It also broadens the definition of school of origin to include public preschool programs. Much of the nuts and bolts on these preschool pieces will likely come in guidance in the coming months. So again, just fair warning that I may not have specific answers for information on preschool, but I will tell you it's very exciting that preschool is going to be included in our some of our McKinney-Vento work. Lots of research has come out in the last few years about the importance of preschool education, particularly for families and children who are experiencing homelessness. So we also have some higher education provisions. It treats information about a homeless student's living situation as a student education record, not as directory information under FERPA. And it's going to require LEAs to coordinate the provision of services under McKinney-Vento and IDEA for homeless students with disabilities. So, and actually, yeah. So, this is one of the times that I have set aside for Q&A. I am going to mute myself for a moment and take a drink of water. I'm going to scroll through the chat box here to see if there's any questions. I will ask them out loud. I will read them out loud, I guess I should say, and answer them out loud. Again, I'm going to do my very best. If you wish to ask a question through your microphone or telephone, please raise your hand and I will go through and unmute your microphones as we need. So give me just a moment here. Okay, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and start looking I'm going to start answering questions from the chat box here, and then I'm going to go to, I have some folks who have raised their hands, and I'm going to go to them. We have students that come from all areas as a charter. Are we still considered a local school? You are not considered a local school. You're not considered a school of residence, but you are considered a school of origin. And I'm not going into the details of school of origin versus school of residency this morning, but do keep that terminology in mind. That part, there's no amended language that impacts school of origin or school of residency as it currently stands. We will have to include the public preschool portion of that now, but there's no changes to the definition of school of origin, I guess is what I would say. We have students who are being dropped off too early or cannot be picked up until later, and we are incurring the cost of before and after care. Is this acceptable? I guess before I could even answer that question, I would need to know a little bit more about that, Kelly. I think I'd need to know why they're being dropped off early and or late. being picked up late. So maybe that's an offline conversation for us to have. The next one, if a McKinney-Vento student becomes stable, you'll no longer need to provide them transportation. You would continue to provide them transportation until the end of the school year, which is the current way we are operating in practice here. With reauthorization, will transportation be required for preschoolers and Head Start? I'm not sure about the Head Start portion of that. If the preschool program is a district preschool program, I do believe transportation is going to be required. Don't quote me. This is just my look and my interpretation of the reauthorized language, but because preschool is going to be included in the definition of school of origin, I would go out on a limb and say that transportation would be required in that situation because it is a child's school of origin. With regards to training local agency, housing program, child welfare, etc., does this fall under the local liaison's responsibilities? Yes, that increased training will fall to the liaison. How we report and monitor that are all the pieces that are up in the air at this time. As a charter public school, do we have to take a student on the spot, quote unquote, if we have a wait list? There's some nuances to that, Arlene. You would have to take them if they had already been enrolled in your school and you are the school of origin. If they are attempting a new enrollment in your school, they should be given priority on that wait list. Nicole, great question. Is there any policy or language for Department of Child Safety to try and keep students in their school of origin? Students are quickly moved from group home schools once removed from home. I'm actually going to talk about that in this next section of the PowerPoint, so we'll talk about that in just a moment, Nicole. For consistency across the state, will the SCA request that we use the same training materials received through your office? That's a great question, Sue. I don't know the answer to that one at this time. I anticipate that we would have some training materials available, but you know, the statutory language is the statutory language. Identification is identification. So I do like the idea of consistency, but I need to wait and see how some of those pieces are going to fall into place moving forward. Okay, let's see. If we do not currently provide transportation for any students because you're a charter school, are we going to be required to find a way to transport students as the school of origin? Corey, you already have that requirement. That's a current requirement, and that is not changing in the law. So yes, you are still required and will continue to be required to provide school of origin transportation. When does the law changes take full effect? July 1st, 2016. How does ESSA affect the set-asides in the Title I-A grant? We're going to talk about that in just a moment, Sue. Susan, with a question about special ed preschool, that is not one I can answer today for you. That's one that I will pull from the chat box and keep for later to definitely get answers on that. All right, and I think I already answered this one, Marissa, about training local agencies, and will that fall to liaison responsibilities? Elizabeth, so now foster kids are going to be considered homeless? No, 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 no. Awaiting foster care placement is being removed from the homeless definition. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, but they are, no, awaiting foster care placement is going to be removed completely from McKinney-Vento on December 10th. All right, so that's all the questions from the chat box at this point. I have some hands raised, I believe. Maybe I don't. Hang on a second here. Nope, I guess I don't have any hands raised. So, Maria, your hand is raised, but it's been raised since before we started, so I'm not sure. I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone if you have a question. All right, I'm not hearing you, Maria, so if you do have a question, go ahead and type that in the chat box. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pause for just a minute again. I'm going to get myself a drink of water. And if you have any other questions at this point, type them in the chat box or raise your hand. So give me just 1 second here. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the reauthorization, including language around Title I homeless and foster children and youth. I do want to start by saying that I ran these slides by Nancy Conitzer, our State Title I Director, and did obtain her approval before sharing this information with all of you. And this language, along with the language in the prior slides about McKinney-Vento, are a compilation of multiple summary documents and presentations that I have received through various trainings and webinars and some of those types of pieces. So I am going to move into this information. I do see there are more questions coming in the chat box, but I'm going to go ahead and wait until we get to the end of this section to adjust those, but I do have myself a note of going back to some of these. So moving into this information, we're going to start with Title I state plans. Requires the state plan statutory amended language, the amended language will require timely and meaningful consultation with various stakeholders within the state in the development of the plan. It's going to require coordination within the McKinney-Vento Act and other federal statutes, including IDEA and the Child Care and Development Block Grant. The good news is we do coordinate with IDEA at this point, and we have recently had some good collaboration with CCDBG, which is great. So we have a head start on those pieces, but there will be we will have to include some language around that in our state plan moving forward. It's going to require the plan to demonstrate how the state educational agency will support local educational agencies in the identification, enrollment, attendance, and school stability of homeless children and youth. Moving on to your plans, the Title I LEA plans, it was going to require timely and meaningful consultation with various stakeholders within the district in the development of the plan, including administrators of other programs mentioned in the Title I statute, including principals, teachers, and parents. It's going to require coordination with services provided under the McKinney-Vento Act, and it's going to require the plan to demonstrate how the LEA will close the achievement gap between students meeting and not meeting state academic standards, and how the LEA will support the school enrollment, attendance, and success of homeless children and youth, including the use of the Title I homeless set-aside. So speaking of the Title I homeless set-asides, and Sue, the question you had just a moment ago, it's going to remove who do not attend participating schools from the reference to serving homeless students with the set-aside funding, and it will which clarifies that services may be provided to all homeless students using the set-aside. We have been doing this in practice as a result of guidance from the U.S. Department of Education, and this is one of those areas that is just clarifying that it's providing educationally related support services to all homeless children and youth with the set-aside funding. Some more information on the set-asides is going to mandate that the set-aside be determined based on the total LEA Title I allocation, which is actually the current way we do it. We require you set aside 0.5% or $100, whichever is greater. And it must be, and it requires, or excuse me, I guess the word is mandates, that the set-aside is prior to any allowable LEA expenditures or transfers. So if you're if your Title I allocation is $1,000, full allocation is $1,000, your set-aside must be based on that $1,000 number, not after you take out other set-asides and pieces. It's also going to encourage using an assessment of the needs of homeless children and youth in determining that set-aside. I will tell you this is going to be the preferred method for moving forward because we want the set-asides to be based on the needs of the students within your district. Many of you are doing this already, but we will be putting out language in the coming months that talks about this being the preferred method for moving forward. This will also allow set-aside funds to fund the local liaison position and school of origin transportation, which is currently in effect under the 2016 Omnibus Bill. So that's also not really a change. We've been practicing that, but it's now in the statutory language. So back to some information about foster care. This is going to require, state plans for children in foster care will require collaboration with the State Child Welfare Agency to ensure the educational stability for foster children, including continuing the student's enrollment in the school of origin, unless this is not in the student's best interest, and is going to mandate the immediate enrollment in a new school if it is not in the student's best interest to continue attending the school of origin, and requires the immediate transfer of records between previous and enrolling schools. And additionally, it's going to require the SEA to appoint an SEA point of contact for child welfare agencies, and this person cannot be the same as me. It cannot be the state coordinator for homeless education. I am not 100% sure what that is going to look like within the Arizona Department of Education, but it does sound as if this will be housed within the Title I office, since these are now Title I requirements. Again, just a friendly reminder, I mentioned earlier that the awaiting foster care placement will definition of included in the homeless definition will be removed from McKinney-Vento effective December 10th, 2016. So bringing this now down to the local level for local plans for children in foster care, this will require collaboration with state or local child welfare agencies to appoint an LEA point of contact for child welfare agencies if, and the caveat is if the local child welfare agency notifies the LEA that it has appointed a point of contact for LEAs. So it's going to be up to the child welfare agency to notify the LEA in writing that they have appointed a point of contact for you as liaisons. It also will require the LEAs to develop and implement written procedures for providing school of origin transportation for the duration of the time that the child is in foster care within 1 year of the enactment, ensuring transportation is received in a prompt and cost-effective manner. More information on transportation before you get too far into that. There's more caveats to this in your local plans. So ensuring that the LEA provides transportation if additional costs are incurred if the local child welfare agency agrees to reimbursing the LEA for that transportation, or the LEA agrees to pay for the transportation, or the local child welfare agency and LEA agree to share the cost of transportation. So this is not placing, I want to be clear that this is not fully placing a burden on you as an LEA to provide transportation for children in foster care. There have to be some agreements between you as LEAs and the State Child Welfare Agency in ensuring that with the assurance that basically that the Child Welfare Agency will be working with you toward reimbursing you for providing that transportation. There's going to be a lot of nuts and bolts to this. I know this is some nuanced language. I know this is very difficult for us to digest today. I just don't want folks to, I just want everybody to remain calm on this. There's a lot of information to come. I'm expecting notification from the U.S. Department of Education for a series of webinars to be occurring during the month of April. So just breathe with me for a minute on this. There will be more information on this coming. Finally, a couple of other topics, and this is more of a state piece that we'll have to work on. It will require the Title I state report card disaggregate student achievement data for homeless and foster students, and it will also require the state agency to disaggregate high school graduation rates for homeless and foster students. So this is something that actually our agency has already been sending emails about discussing when we will have to implement that. So that is it for the Title I information, and this is the second time within the presentation that I have set aside for Q&A. So I'm going to go back up here and start reading through these questions. Give me 1 second to take a drink, and then we will be moving on into these questions here. So give me just 1 second. Okay, so the first question. So it is my understanding that foster children will no longer be considered automatically homeless. That is correct. Again, the term awaiting foster care placement is being removed from the definition of homelessness within the McKinney-Vento Act. Stephanie, very good question. There are youth who qualify under McKinney-Vento and then DCS becomes involved. How will these youth be served under McKinney-Vento and DCS? That is a great, great, great question. Again, if a student qualifies under McKinney-Vento, they qualify for the remainder of the school year, so I don't anticipate that changing for that school year. But again, we'll see what the guidance documents come out and say around that topic. Going back to the wait list, at a charter, if we have several students on the list, why do we put a homeless student on as a priority? Because they are a homeless student and they would have, they should receive some kind of priority for enrollment since the law requires immediate enrollment of children and youth experiencing homelessness. So there are generally always priorities around enrollment, and homelessness would just be one of those priorities. Jacqueline, I guess I would probably be the same answer. Does this mean we have to have a specific priority title in our system to give the child priority on the wait list? Again, you'll have to set how that priority is set is going to be up to you, but you will have to set some kind of priority and it should be documented. And basically, you're going to have to look at your procedures to answer the second part of that question, what documentation can be requested for proof that the child qualifies for McKinney priority. You're going to have to look at your procedures and how you identify students and go through some of those pieces, and you'll have to make an appropriate identification of the student and work through that process, but you would have to look at your procedures and how you do that. Will there be a common tool that is used by all liaisons? I assume, Dorothy, that you're referring to the Title I set-asides. There are some existing tools out there already around the needs assessment, so I do think, yes, we can probably make that available. Will each DCS office have a point of contact, or will there be one for the agency as a whole? I can't answer that question, Dorothy. That's going to be up to the That's going to be up to DCS and how they go about that. Next question, will you be published in PowerPoint somewhere that we can be accessed? It's actually already on the web page under the reauthorization link, Lynn, so everybody, you have access to the PowerPoint already. It's on the web page under the reauthorization link. Sue, can we arrange a meeting and or training with the liaisons and the local child welfare agencies to ensure that all are under the same understanding? I actually think this is a really great idea, but I would suggest holding off on that a little bit. I wouldn't be doing it quite yet. Remember, all of this information is very new, and we actually still haven't received any kind of specific written information from U.S. Department of Education on this, so I don't want us getting too far ahead of ourselves on what some of those what some of those pieces look like. Important to remember that while everything goes into effect July 1st, many liaisons may not work in June and July. Darlene, you are correct, but your LEA is still responsible for ensuring the implementation of McKinney-Vento, so that is something as an LEA you will have to look at. If foster kids are no longer homeless, why do we still transport them? That's a great question. They are no longer homeless, but under Title I now there are still requirements. And again, it's not saying that we must transport them. It's saying that we can transport them, but it's going to be there's going to have to be collaboration with the state child welfare agency, and they're going to have to either reimburse you for the cost of that transportation, or you're going to have to, or you're going to be agreeing to foot the cost of that transportation. So it's not necessarily a requirement that you transport them, but if you do transport them, there is some recourse for funding. Many times liaisons, especially new ones, have a difficult time educating their superiors of these mandates. Are district superintendents being informed of these changes? I think district superintendents and charter administrators are being informed of these changes, but through various other avenues. Many organizations are providing information around reauthorization, national organizations, even local organizations. It's going to be a matter of if that information is being read, quite frankly. So it's going to be important. We will likely send in, a letter or some sort of information out to superintendents and charter administrators at the beginning of implementation with some information about the role of liaisons and specifically the capacity needs of liaisons and ensuring that they do have capacities to fulfill the requirements of the law. Oh, great question, Marissa. Will all students in foster care be entitled to transportation, or are there limits based on their time in DCS custody? Great question, but I don't have an answer. It seems to me the language in the law doesn't put any kind of timeline on there, but it'll be interesting. Again, we're waiting on information from the U.S. Department of Education and what all of those pieces look like. How does not considered homeless affect National School Lunch Program? I assume you're referring to, Anne, I think you're, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you're referring to foster students. Foster students qualify for National School Lunch Program regardless of McKinney-Vento eligibility, so that shouldn't be an issue. There's a separate categorical eligibility for children in foster care. So are districts required to indicate in official data system homelessness in order to be able to disaggregate the data? Yeah, actually, Darlene, you're already required to do that. You should be inputting homeless students within your student information system along with their primary nighttime residence. So that requirement's already there, and it will continue to be there. Oh, Brandy, you're the best. Brandy Adams from Legacy Traditional. If any charters need help or ideas regarding procedures to ensure that McKinney-Vento kids get priority when you have a wait list, you're welcome to contact her, Brandy Adams at legacytraditional.org. Thank you, Brandy. Brandy is a member of the Liaison Committee of Practitioners and is a great resource for charter folks. So thank you, Brandy, and I'll be sure to put that out in a larger email, so you'll be getting hundreds of emails, Brandy. Melody Rivera, my understanding is that we list a child as homeless only when we have the residency form completed and notarized stating that. Oh my gosh, no, Melody. There is no requirement, there is no paperwork requirement in the old law or the amended law that requires that you have a residency form or an eligibility questionnaire. The requirement is that you as liaisons identify eligible students. And in identifying eligible students, you may collect or use certain documents, but none of that paperwork is required by law. As a matter of fact, requiring a residency form or shared residency forms and requiring it be notarized has already been deemed in the past a barrier to the enrollment and retention of a child and youth in homeless situations. So I would definitely be looking at your procedures to ensure that that is not a requirement. Will I be providing a guidance document with the information covered in this presentation? I'm sure there will be lots of information, Paul, that will be going out over the next several months. I've referenced a reauthorization webpage within the homeless webpage. So there's lots of summary documents. This PowerPoint's there. I referenced just a moment ago when talking about Brandy and at Legacy Traditional a committee of practitioners, a liaison committee of practitioners. We will be convening a meeting of that committee next week, I believe already, a week from today, I believe it is, and I'm going to be asking for their help, asking for their guidance, and looking at what documents need to be developed, what documents need to be revamped, and what training's going to look like in professional development moving forward, formal and informal technical assistance and what that's going to look like moving forward. So I believe it's going to be a very lively meeting, but I'm looking forward to it, and yes, we'll be providing all kinds of information. We will be in cycle 4 monitoring. Will these changes affect our requirements? Debbie, yeah, I think the simple answer to that is yes. The changes there will likely be changes in cycle 4. What I haven't determined yet is if those changes will take effect for cycle 4 the 2016-2017 school year or not. So bear with me on those requirements. I've got to meet with our monitoring manager to determine some of those pieces. Hilda, where is the PowerPoint? It's on the reauthorization link on the webpage. It's there for you. Yes, Melody, great. That was a very good way of phrasing it. You can use that as a tool to assist in determining eligibility, absolutely. There's lots of resources on the liaison resource documents on the web page, so there's lots of information there that you can use. You know, Arlene, that's a really good question, but being that foster care after December 10th, foster care is not going to be a part of McKinney-Vento, I'm not sure that you would have to worry about the priority in that situation that you have written here about 2 foster children and 2 of our own on a wait list. Lots of changes with the implementation of ESSA. Will there be guidance on changing LEA policies on homeless students? Yeah, we'll have lots of information that goes out about that. I have received some questions, and even from some of you who are asking these questions right now about revising policies. Again, I wouldn't jump ahead on anything yet simply because we don't have guidance from the U.S. Department of Education on those pieces yet. So I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves on that. What I would do is I would pull your policy, take a look at it, compare it to some of the information that I've shared today, and start maybe jotting down some of the items that may need to be changed in your policy, but I wouldn't get too far ahead of, I wouldn't start the process of actually having your board change and approve that policy. Oh, Karen, very, very, very good question. If we utilize our competitive homeless subgrant to provide services to students who are awaiting foster care, what will the impact of that change in qualification next year on the grant? So Karen, what I will tell you is, again, awaiting foster care placement does not come out of the definition of homelessness until December 10th. And so all of the students that we identify from the beginning of the year until December 10th will continue to qualify for the remainder of that year, which is actually going to get you through the third and final year of your grant. So I actually don't think it's going to impact you too dramatically next year. Susan, previously foster were not homeless. Yes, they actually were homeless by definition. So it's being removed from the homeless definition, so they will no longer be considered homeless under McKinney-Vento. Hilda, a couple of folks have given you, provided you the link to the PowerPoint on the webpage. Should you have your administrator or registrar or attendance person review this webinar as well? I have no problem with that. However you feel it's best to share that information, get it out. Again, all of this information is on the webpage. It's public information. I think it would be great to start having those conversations. Will the homeless grants be reviewed based on the new policy changes and possible increase? Transportation and other support services can be expensive based on the family needs. So basically, next school year, to answer that question without really answering it, sorry, Jacqueline. Next year is going to be the third and final year of the grant. I don't anticipate that, although we're going to have some policy changes, I don't anticipate there being dramatic changes to existing grants. So it will be the third and final year, and we may have some changes when we go out for a new competitive round at, basically a year from now. So there could be some changes, and obviously your grant submissions at that time could look a little bit different, but I don't think the grant aspect of it's going to change dramatically. Great question. What are the concerns about McKinney-Vento numbers decreasing next year and then impacting the amount of subgrant funds that LEAs will receive? So again, you're going to be in the third and final year of your grant, so you don't need to worry about it decreasing next year. We are looking, I will tell you, we are looking at nationally, I should say, we are looking at how and what the concerns about McKinney-Vento numbers decreasing. I actually don't anticipate our numbers changing dramatically here in Arizona because of the guidance that we've been working under. But obviously, I do think they're going to go down somewhat. But unfortunately, we have no concept in the state of Arizona exactly how far they are going to go down, because we don't collect foster care as a separate piece within the McKinney-Vento identification. So we really have, some of you individually may know how many foster kids you have, but I can't do a statewide aggregate of how many foster students qualify under McKinney-Vento at this time. I do think that we will probably have an FAQ document, Hilda, around these questions, because I do agree these questions have been outstanding. I wish I had better answers for many of you, but I actually absolutely anticipate there being a plethora of information coming out in the coming months. We'll have guidance documents, we'll revamp existing guidance, we'll do all kinds of things. The reason I'm being vague in the answer to that is because I want to convene my committee, my liaison committee of practitioners next week, just to make sure that we're all on the same page and that the needs of all liaisons are being met and getting some of those pieces out. But yes, I actually do believe an FAQ document would be an outstanding thing. And right at the end of this webinar, I can download this chat box to to be able to go through all of these questions, and I'll capture many of them and probably start dropping them in a document for you, for liaisons to review. And hopefully this recording will be available as well. All right, so I've caught up on questions in the chat box. It only took me 15 minutes, but there were many, many great questions. I am not seeing any hands raised, so I'm going to give everybody just a minute while I grab a drink and see if any other questions come up, and then we're about to end, so give me just 1 minute to get a drink here. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat box, and I don't see any hands raised. So basically, I'm going to take us to the final slide with my contact information. My contact information has largely remained the same. We did move floors in December. My office and my assistant, we moved floors in December again. So we do have a new bin number. However, if you're still using the old bin number, if you're sending me something by mail, it still finds its way to me, but we now are bin 31. Obviously, my phone number is there, and that 800 number that I have in red there is primarily for folks outside of Maricopa County who need to contact me. That 800 number rings directly to my desk. So we will be able to get your answers question. I have a half-time assistant now supporting the program, so Joanne is wonderful. I actually think she's on the webinar here with us this morning, so I'll brag about her for a minute. Joanne is wonderful. She's helping me answer the phones, particularly when I'm away. She helps me on the back end with some other work and things around the program. She's really good at talking with parents when we get parent calls here, so she's doing a great she's doing a great job. She's been a great addition to the team, to me, the team, if you will, over the last a year, about a year she's been working for me now. So it's been really great. Love having her as part of the team, and we're going to do our best moving forward into the new year and new language. And thank you. Please, you're all aware, I pride myself on returning all phone calls and emails in a timely manner, and again, I have Joanne to assist me with that now. So we're gradually getting better on that. If you ever have any questions, I don't want you to hesitate to contact me at any time. Please email me, please call me. I do have Joanne answering my calls when I'm not in the office, but sometimes if you need quick responses, email is the best. My job requires me to be out of the office a lot, providing technical assistance and monitoring and all of those things. So oftentimes email is the best way to get a hold of me. So I do pride myself on that. Thank you all for your time this morning. As promised, we ended a few minutes early. Again, I apologize for the confusion around the webinar systems between GoTo and Blackboard Collaborate, but I think we ended up having about 150 of the 165 that were registered who joined us. So thank you all very much. I'm looking very forward to working with all of you in the implementation of our reauthorized language, and thank you all very much for your time this morning.